stuff here kind of gets me a little bit.
Can't come up there.
I have a little bit of trouble. I brought this today. This was built for use at the Philippi Covered Bridge. When the Philippi Covered Bridge burnt a year or two before this one. It's for making the pegs. You cut locust posts, you cut little locust pins. They have to be black locusts. They have to make a turn in there. They have to be green, and they have to be cut green. Last year I came and I donated one of the pins when we did the restoration, one of the tree nails. They're called tree nails. The English bastardized it called trennels, but they're tree nails. And I brought one that we'd taken out of here, and you could see the bend in it where it went through. This was made for the Philippi Bridge, and the way you're supposed to do it, the way you're supposed to make them is you squat down here and use a draw knife and round them up. Well, my dad was a blacksmith. He was born in Oklahoma in 1914 before running water electricity and ferried horses. And when I told him what we were doing in Philip, he says, dumbass, that's not the way it was done. I said, that's the way it's done in the books, and that's the way people perceive it being done. But actually what happened was that you would sharpen up the little locust pin with a hatchet similar to this one. This is a flint edge hatchet. This is a hatchet that was available to Lemuel and Samuel Chenoweth at the day of the building. This is from the early 1800s. You sharpen up your pin, and the blacksmith would sharpen a hole in a piece of steel the right diameter, and you pound the pin through there, and it comes out round. And they did that as far back as, blacksmithing back in the 1500s. He says this stuff here was made up for shingle work. Okay, so we brought it to this bridge anyway, because that's basically the way they done Philippi. And after I showed the engineers and Dr. Kemp what my dad said, he did some research and said, you're probably right. So we left it here. I didn't take it home. And at that time, it became the bullshitter's bench and the workbench. Now, I've got some of the plans and some of the prints from the restoration. And if you look through the bridge, as you look through the bridge, it's not labeled, and it wasn't labeled in the time, because back in the day, they didn't have access to compasses or didn't give a damn. Before 1840, they really didn't give a damn about measurements. They built barns 2 axe handles wide, 3 axles, whatever. And until 1840, in 1840, someone in Missouri invented what we call today the framing square. That's 2 foot on one side and 16 on the other. And at that point in time, things become standardized. The tenons in the top of post and beam stuff become 2 inches wide, because you could describe it. Still, they didn't measure much. They just scribed stuff out all the time. Before 1840, all the timber frame buildings in the world were made with the full scribe method. And if you find one before that time, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, if only in pictures, there's a Roman numeral at every post. Because the mayor would make a post and put a tenon on it, to I, and then he would lay it to where it's going to go and scribe around it and make the mortise to fit. And if I'm doing the same thing and you're doing the same thing, they're not interchangeable, but they fit right where they go. But after 1840, it becomes square rule framing. This bridge is built, one of the earliest examples of square rule framing, because all the tenons were 2 inches thick. So they labeled this bridge. When we put it back together, the architects label them upstream side, downstream side. When we took it apart, we found different handwriting in the daps and the mortises of every joint. And they were actually 2 different colors, red and black. Dr. Kemp summarized from that it probably wasn't built here. That it was probably cut somewhere else to fit and just brought in here on wagons. And the fact that we just ascertained today that it was done in 2 seasons, it's probably the truth. The mayor and I had a little conversation this morning, and it always upsets me a little bit because my wife, Kimberly Smith, you gotta hold it all the time?
No, don't hold it.
Okay, better. All right, so my wife, Kimberly Smith, raised 4 boys while I'm on the road restoring buildings. And I think back to Lemuel and Samuel Chenoweth's wives who were living in Beverly. And their husbands packed up on horse and buggy and said, we're going to go build a bridge 100 miles from here. We'll see you around Christmas. And what they had to do at home, what they had to do at home with taking in the crops and feeding the kids and milking the cows while their husbands were out doing the love of their life, the labor of love, building these covered bridges. So I didn't look up their name, but I wished I had, because in today's world, there's not near enough credit given to the women that stay home and take care of things while their husbands are out of town working construction or whatever they have to do. So when we started tagging everything, we had to take this bridge apart. There was a metal acro through here. I don't know if anybody was in town when that was going on, but there was a metal bridge through here, metal arc that was loaned to them by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to hold it up. That's what was supporting it. There's a West Virginia magazine, West Virginia Wild Wonderful magazine, where they interviewed Dr. Kemp, myself, and a couple other guys. When we come out to look at this during the restoration of Philippi, Dr. Kemp fell through the acro and fell into Buffalo Creek. And we thought it might have killed him. Sam Houston ran down to see what was going on, and Henry said, I'm fine, Sam. We took him up here. There was a laundromat up here, and he borrowed his shirt from one of us, a pair of pants, and out of the truck, and throwed his clothes in the laundromat, and he came back down and finished drawing the covered bridge. But he labeled everything. So if this is the upstream side, this would be U1, U2, U3, 4, 5, all the way through the bridge. Here's the drawing of the repair U2. Between columns U2 and U3, there's a repair upstream. If you want to look at this bench, you will see all these letters in here, all these U's. You see the U's in here, and the ups and the D's, and the 1, 2, 3, and the numbers. We cut little pieces of aluminum flashing into squares and stamped the letters in here and put them on the post. And there's the mark still to this day, part of the history of the Barrickville Covered Bridge. The restoration of this bridge is only the second step in the history of covered bridges in the United States. When the Philippi Covered Bridge caught fire, Robert Mollahan, the U.S. congressman from this district, who was a huge historic preservation nut, he established Vandalia Heritage in Fairmont, and had all that work done in Wheeling and all over his district. He loved historic preservation. The Philippi Covered Bridge burnt. And the story on the Philippi Covered Bridge catching fire was that there was a very well-endowed lady that worked at the gas station on the north side of the bridge. And she probably was showing too much. And the guy filling the gas tank from the tanker was paying attention to this girl talking to her, and the gas tank overflowed, and gas ran down the hill into the covered bridge, and either a cigarette or a backfire ignited the Philippi Covered Bridge. Sometimes we got to thank the women once again, because what that did was that brought all the federal dollars to the state. Alan Mollahan said, we got to save that bridge. He went to Robert C. Byrd, who was not very much for preservation, but really good for pork barrel money, and said, Bob, we need to save this bridge. And Bob says, well, I'll look into it. Called him back a couple days later and said, hey, that's the only covered bridge in the United States on a federal highway. So we can put this thing in the ICE-T money, which is interstate transportation, and come up with a pile of money and send it to West Virginia to fix the bridge. There were no contractors, zero contractors that were in the business of restoring covered bridges in the United States at the time. So the task fell to Dr. Emery Kemp at WVU. So WVU did that, was a construction company down there. Dr. Kemp was a good friend of mine. He recruited me to go down. He got Gordon Blair Lee, Tom Anderson, Sam Houston. It was several of us historic preservationists. We put together a crew down there. We put a tarp over it like a Conestoga wagon and completed the job in half the time for half the money. So the state of West Virginia had this money. What are we going to do with this money? I've got, if anybody wants to look at them, I've got minutes from a meeting at the covered bridge in Philippi where Dr. Kemp wanted to do this one before Philippi, but that one burnt. He was really interested in doing this one. So they had the extra money, so they said, put it out for bid. Let's get it out for bid. Well, the low bid went to Orders Construction, and they hired us, Allegheny Restoration and Builders out of Morgantown, who were the workers on the Philippi Bridge, to do the historic work in here. At the time, and I'm sure it still does, it belonged to the State Department of Highways for some odd reason. It should belong to the State Department of Parks and Rec Parks. This should be as good as any state park in the state of West Virginia. So the Department of Highways come in here with all their modern standards and all their modern questions and EITs, and they wanted us to test every beam. They wanted to take it to the WVU and put it in test frames and make sure it was up to par. They wanted us to test the gravel and the abutment. I asked the engineer, I said, it's been limestone for 10,000 years. It's had all that time to study. How's it going to fail? Give me 10,000 years to study for a test. I'm going to ace that puppy. But he laughed and said, no, it's West Virginia Department of Highway standards. So we fought through that, and we went to a WVU, and we made the test frames up. We tested all of the epoxies in here. Every one of them was tested. We took every floor beam to Evansdale campus at WVU on a truck, put them in a test frame, and loaded them with so much weight and checked the deflection. What we found was that they're all poplar. What we found was that each one, the beams tested in threes. Every third one had a certain strength, every second one had a certain strength, and the third one as they went across this bridge. And so we're trying to determine what the hell. And we're at WVU with the finest engineers in the world. Dr. Kemp was an Oxford graduate and also was the engineer at the Sydney Opera House in Australia. So we had some of the finest engineers in the world up there trying to figure this out. So we're sitting out back in the Evansdale campus looking at the wind, and the wind was blowing pretty hard, and a bunch of trees, and Emery looked at that and said, John, I got it. Come in here. So we went in there with micrometers and checked the growth rings. And a tree, as it grows, now this is all lost in modern carpentry. You ask the modern carpenter this, they got a clue. But to Lemuel Chenoweth, he knew exactly what he was doing. Is that as a tree grows, it develops compression strength in the bottom of the stump and loses its tensile strength. The next limb up's got saves some of its tensile strength so it can move, but loses its compression strength because it doesn't have to hold the tree up. And the top branch, it's all tensile strength, no compression. It can blow in the wind. If a direct gale comes through here and blows that tree down, it's going to snap at the bottom, not at the top. Those top branches are just going to sway and bend and be just as good on the ground as they were in the tree. So what they did was they used the first cut for this beam, the second cut for that beam, and the third cut for that beam, and the first cut, second cut, third cut. So they spread the load so the guy could stand on his bridge in Richmond, Virginia. I mean, he knew that much about science growing up in the early 1800s in the wilderness of Virginia. And sometimes you have to wonder what kind of genius the guy really was, to come up with his bridge. We had to go back, actually, Dr. Kemp and I had to go back to those days and those technologies with these tools that I'm showing you. The bridge has got some camber in it, which makes it a little longer than the hole. And so it's not going to fit in the hole no matter what because it's pushing tension back out to the abutments. And so the way they found that was we put a straight line through the bridge and we hung a chain, a little small chain through the bridge and hung it to where it had the right amount of camber, 6 inches in the middle. And then the distance at each post between those two marks is what it had to go up. And so then these posts, these diagonal beams here is what holds that up. So as a vehicle gets in here and it comes to that first bent, what it does is transfer that load back to the abutment right here. And then the next one transfers the load back to that one, which transfers it back to the abutment, and so forth till you get halfway across, and halfway across it starts putting it the other way. The mayor asked me today, was this thing in any danger? No, it does need some work. Since we found the epoxy repairs and the methods and ways of doing that, they've changed a little bit. They found out that dry rot spores can live up to 18 inches away in healthy wood. So we just cut out the bad wood and then epoxy to that, and we should have treated the wood 18 inches away with borates and killed the mold, because there's a couple places you can look around the bridge where you'll see that dry rot spores have come out and attacked it and went right to the epoxy. So that needs refixed again. The Department of Highways has now changed that to where you have to do that. But all these standards, every one of the standards for the U.S. Department of Highways, restoration of covered bridges, come out of this bridge right here, nationwide. Nationwide. It should be listed as a national treasure. Not a, it should be listed on the Department of Highways as a national treasure. This is the birthplace of modern bridge restoration. Right here, we're right in this little bitty village in the middle of West Virginia. And it was redone basically as you go through. I actually still have the nails for the siding. I had probably half a box left. I'm talking 50-pound boxes. I've got hundreds of those left yet. It's just a wonderful experience, and you can probably tell by my little talk here how much I love doing this stuff. I'm 75 years old in January, and I'm restoring the buildings at Hawks Nest and Holly River State Park today with the same engineer that's listed on these papers right here, and he's a year older than me. Sometimes when you get into doing something that you love, you'll pack up your mule and leave your family in Beverly to come to Berry to build a covered bridge for the state of Virginia, huh?
Her name was Nancy Ann Hart.
Nancy Ann Hart
was John's Lemuel's wife, and she was the great granddaughter of John Hart, who signed the Declaration of Independence.
That's what kind of tough people we got. The lineage goes back to this bridge. And don't let nobody tell you that Nancy Ann Hart didn't help put this thing together. Huh? Because Lemuel could have brought the kids up here for 2 months and fed them. Has anybody got any questions? I got